Guatemala. I know we should always help our neighbor, especially in time of a natural disaster. But this is not the case with Guatemala, because the poor people will never see a dollar. Only a few rich man will start to get richer. To the time minister be happy, write a letter because
Mr. Politician, we got to change the plans.
God have mercy.
Mr. Politician, we got to change the plans.
This a fi we with a fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. Not an inch, not a foot, not a centimeter. We never give up to Guatemala, because look what them do to the people of my color. If they
Morning.
Good morning.
And welcome to Sunday Review here at XTV 3304 Amandala Drive, Sweet Southside, Belize, the sacred territory for African people and descendants of African people. This is Sunday Review, the only news review talk show in the country. Our tag is Making Sense of the News. I am the producer and host. Yeah, Marin Coleman, co-host. And a good troublemaker, Brother Akko Mutota out of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning, Brother Akko.
Morning, Sister YaYa. Morning to our guest, Michael LaRose, the son of the legendary LaRose. I'll call him the original old man, LaRose.
I'm loving this, right? Because they're both brothers are from Trinidad and Tobago. We should have three brothers. We're waiting for, hoping the elder joins us. And so, I know you have to, this one, I could just shut up because Brother Akko got story, being a brother in the movement for years. And then Brother Michael LaRose, I met him in December of 2023 when I was in London for Sister Esther Jose wedding. And so Aganda, another good troublemaker, Brother John Gus from Grenada, he launched 2 books. And so nighttime, me want to catch bus by myself, and I don't have no internet access, but to trust the creator, our African ancestors and ancestors, and boom, I find the library. And that's how I met Michael LaRose for the first time. But we are church talking. Welcome. I tell Michael, look at the only so I come and get up past Sunday Review, because he's the editor of a book that about the life. It was co-written by both Brother Anselm. Is that how you pronounce his name? Anselm?
Yeah. Ansel Douglas.
Ansel
Samuel, sorry.
Ansel Samuel. And the book is
Anselm.
Anselm.
Yes.
Samuel. And it's My Life, Panman, Black Panther, Youth Worker. And Brother Michael LaRose from New Beacon Books. We're more than a bookstore. That's their tag. Thank you, Christy. Edited the book. So, Brother Michael, we are come back to you. Well, first off, you did a London. Tell me where they go under London. What the weather like? What's the vibes?
It's sunny this afternoon, and we put the clocks forward for British summertime. So that's what caused a few problems, and may have caused a few problems with Anselm Samuel, who is the author, and the co-author is Jean Tate. So they're people who have worked very closely together over the years and produced a manuscript, which then, because, well, we can go into the book. Do you want me to go into the book immediately?
No. I just wanted to make an introduction so we could get people ready, because we have a Caribbean correspondent, Brother Akko. Forgive the correspondent. I mean, so. But yeah, you're doing good, Brother Michael. So yeah, I didn't know about the time change either. So when you made me aware of it, we could understand why the elder may have been thrown off by that.
That's right. But we could talk both about the book and about what I'm doing in London.
Most definitely we will. And of course, you have to have some training news showing from unionism days. And I definitely want the opportunity for big up Belize, because oftentimes there's a component of Belize's labor uprising that is not recognized in the region. People tend to name member Belize as a Caribbean country when they talk about the Caribbean, because we're not an island and we're mainland in what's called Central America. Yes. Thanks for being with us this morning, Brother Michael. Brother Akko, the mic is yours. Whom I'm referring to as our Caribbean correspondent when it comes to Sunday Review.
So thank you again, Sister YaYa, and greetings again, Brother Michael. I'm going to read a few pieces of news that emerged in the Caribbean in the last week. And the headlines, the first headline we have is titled Mysterious Disappearances Spook Residents of Caribbean Island. It's a report out of St. John's, Antigua. I'm going to read part of it because I'm not sure that people in the Caribbean understand what is happening here. And the report says Hyacinth Gage, 74, disappeared 6 years ago. The worst part is the mental torture her daughter Patricia Joseph says. The gut-wrenching flashes of wondering what her mother's last moments were. The infinite state of limbo. 6 years after her mother's disappearance, Patricia still catches herself looking out for the distinctive orange line raincoat that Hyacinth Gage 74 was wearing the day she vanished, in the hope it may hold a clue. Tragically, Hyacinth is just one of an ever-increasing number of people on the tiny island of Antigua to disappear without trace in what some have dubbed an epidemic, others a crisis. At least 9 persons have vanished in the past 2 years alone. Patricia Joseph says, not knowing what happened to her mother is particularly gut-wrenching. It was to trigger an excruciating series of fruitless island-wide searches and desperate appeals for help. We became detectives, my sister and I. Over the years, other families have experienced the same thing, people disappearing in Antigua. They went to the police got angry with us and asked us to stop. They became annoyed at our constant questions, so eventually we had to back off and pray. The number of people to vanish in Antigua appears to be disproportionately high compared with other islands. Speculation is rife. Theories range from the banal, a lack of will to investigate by the police. However, the disappearance of a 9-year-old girl on 12 March sent the nation reeling and sparked extensive searches. The body was found 2 days later in a case that has caused widespread public outrage and protest and sent rumors into overdrive. A few years ago also, a Russian-Canadian tourist on vacation in Antigua disappeared. It has come to light that over 60 people in the last few years have appeared missing in Antigua, more than a third in the last decade alone. Some of these disappearances have left people in a lot of pain and disappointment. A family member went missing and another was murdered, an investigator said. On anonymity because he feels threatened. Families are suffering. Many have gone to their graves without ever seeing justice for their loved ones. So this is a case of missing people in Antigua. And this is a situation that's happening in Trinidad also. There's a lot of speculation that it could be organ trafficking. It could be human trafficking. It's a tragic case that has come to light in Antigua. So that's one of the pieces we want to do. The second piece is on Puerto Rico. And the headline is, PROMESA continues colonialism in Puerto Rico. PROMESA. And this is a statement by Rafael Bernabe, a Puerto Rican activist. And he says, PROMESA means promise in Puerto Rico. But for Puerto Ricans, PROMESA is a new form of colonialism. And PROMESA stands for the Puerto Rico Oversight Management and Economic Stability Act. It was an act established by the US Congress that gives control or puts control of Puerto Rico's budget in the hands of 7 unelected people appointed by the US government. Puerto Rico first became a U.S. colony in 1898 and remained so well into the 21st century. Today, that colonial relationship is structured through PROMESA, an unelected board that controls the island's budget and that has unleashed a vicious cycle of debt and privatization that has mired Puerto Ricans in poverty, unemployment, and underdevelopment. Puerto Rican activist and sociologist Rafael Bernabe, he's also a historian. He's one of the few representatives in the parliament, the government, from an organization called Movimiento Victoria Ciudadana, MVC, who won office in the 2020 elections. He's an author, and he has been an advocate for self-determination for Puerto Rico. He indicates that there are different tendencies in Puerto Rico. One tendency wanting Puerto Rico to become a state of the US, another wants independence. But according to him, despite these tendencies, there is a growing movement demanding self-determination for Puerto Rico. That is the second part of the news. The third piece is on Haiti. Very interestingly, the Haitian defense minister stated that the government takes public security very seriously. This is not according to the people we interviewed yesterday on our webinar. And in the revised budget, approximately 31 billion Haitian gourds were allocated for public security and defense. Quoting the minister, "We are building a large brand new training center in Tabare that can accommodate 1,000 recruits." The minister stated that over the next 6 months, to strengthen Haiti's armed forces, 7.4 billion gourds will be invested in recruiting new soldiers, building military infrastructure, and buying new equipment. For his part, Benji Tilias, the Secretary of State for Communications, stated that nearly 12 million gourds will be invested for the benefit of the PNH, the National Police, and the FADH, the Armed Forces of Haiti, in the purchase of materials and equipment. My take on this is that you have enough money to buy arms, but not enough money to provide health, housing, and public transport for the people of Haiti, as indicated in our interview with the people from Haiti yesterday. The next piece of news is from Trinidad and Tobago. And the headline is Trinidad and Tobago joins Colombia, Jamaica, Guyana, and more on the US Level 3 travel advisory list. Trinidad and Tobago has been added to the US Level 3 travel advisory list, joining countries like Pakistan, Egypt, Colombia, Jamaica, Guyana, and others, including Bangladesh and New Caledonia. The US indicated that Trinidad and Tobago, despite extending a state of emergency through April 2025 due to high risk of terrorism and kidnapping. But even though the ongoing state of emergency exists, Trinidadian authorities have continuously seen an increase in crime and murder. On December 30th, the government of Trinidad and Tobago declared the state of emergency, and it seems that nothing has changed. In the statement from the US government, it has indicated to foreigners and US legal permanent residents and US citizens that there have been recent victims of kidnapping, and the advisory warned that violence and shootings occur regularly in some areas of Port of Spain. Due to these security risks, US government employees stationed in Trinidad and Tobago are restricted from traveling to specific areas on the island, including Laventille, the southern end of Charlotte Street in the city, Piccadilly Street, Besson Street, Beetham, Sealots, Cocorit, and the interior of the Queen's Park Savannah, downtown Port of Spain. The advisory says common violent crime include murder, robbery, assault, sexual assault, home invasion, and kidnapping. The report indicates that this classification comes at a crucial time, coinciding with the Twin Island nation's peak tourism season and its new endeavor to acquire tourists. So this is Trinidad and Tobago. As reported in the news, and then the last piece I want to read is on Guyana. And as you know, those of us may know that there is a dispute, a border dispute with Guyana and Venezuela. And so the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in the Caribbean recently, and the statement reads, US vows to protect Guyana and issues warning to Venezuela. United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio has warned Venezuela that if it attacks oil assets in Guyana's Stabroek block or takes military action against Guyana, it would face tough consequences. Rubio was speaking during a press conference on Thursday following a bilateral meeting with the president of Guyana, Dr. Irfan Ali. It would be a very bad day for the Venezuelan regime if they were to attack Guyana or attack ExxonMobil. The Secretary of State also pointed out the presence of the US Navy vessel currently in Guyana waters, saying this is a demonstration of our ability. He added that the US has a big Navy and we have the commitment that exists to protect Guyana. Those are the 4 pieces of news that I wanted to read today. Last one, as you know, when the US says that they want to protect you, you know exactly what you shouldn't do. And this issue with Guyana and Venezuela, as we have always stated in the Caribbean, has to be resolved through negotiation and diplomacy, not through force. We know wherever the US intervenes, we know the chaos, the death, and the destruction that occurs. And so those are the 4 pieces of information I wanted to share relative to the Caribbean this morning.
Thanks, Brother Akko. Brother Michael, what were your thoughts as you listened to those stories that Brother Akko shared? Remember now that the majority of the people in the Caribbean are African descendants. Majority. We have other groups of people, but African descendants, racialized as Black people, are the majority. So, for we people would have thought both. Well, what thoughts cross your mind as you listened to Michael?
Well, both as personally and as an organization, we've been involved in the issues in the Caribbean for the longest while, and also want to inform ourselves of all the history and the victories and the defeats in the movements in the Caribbean. So these examples that Brother Akko was talking about tells you are indicators of where we at, both economically and politically in the Caribbean, and what different people within the islands that make up the Caribbean, and I'm talking about whatever language you speak, whether it be French, English, Spanish, Dutch, whatever, that there is a commonality of experience and a commonality of oppression. And all the stories that were just reported can be transposed onto many different regions in the Caribbean. So we face similar problems. And the issue, I think, today is that since we face similar problems and have faced similar problems for such a long time, it's time that we deal with them together, no matter what language we speak.
I hear you. And as a African descendants, racialized as a Black man from the Caribbean who stay engaged, how important it is for people in the Caribbean diaspora to remain engaged in these processes, especially when you consider, for those who may be in the United States and looking at the United States foreign policy as it regards to migration, some of them, whenever think they're going back home, might come back home, never sustain relationships with family and friends or what's going on in the communities that nurture them. How important is it when you talk about the unification of our people or finding commonalities in the Caribbean, Brother Michael? Would you consider the Caribbean diaspora?
The Caribbean diaspora as nearly a kind of forgotten force. in the Caribbean, we don't try and mobilize the Caribbean diaspora. And to a certain extent, the Caribbean diaspora doesn't have some of the weaknesses we have in the politics of the Caribbean. They don't have that merely loyalty to political parties. It's been weakened when they're in the diaspora. And also being in the heart of these countries like USA and Britain, sees a Caribbean, that it's a place where those policies can be exposed and mobilized around. So it is a kind of forgotten political force that we have to mobilize.
In Belize, we had general elections, I believe it was March 12th. Believe me, a number of Belizeans in the United States in particular got a free plane ticket for con vote, which is breaking the electoral laws, but this has been normalized. And sometimes it's a particular ethnic group that may be attached to a political party. I don't know if that happens in Trinidad, Brother Akko, if we have Caribbean diaspora people coming in to vote in elections?
Well, if they are registered to vote in Trinidad, they can travel to vote. But I don't know that the government provide any assistance. I'm not aware of that at all. But you know, if you are you have legal residence in Trinidad, you can come home to vote. I know some people who have done it. They left and they would come to vote. But in speaking about the diaspora, if I would just make a comment on that. So Michael said the diaspora is not mobilized, but there was a time when the diaspora was the driving force behind a lot of change in the Caribbean. Now, if you look at the pre-independence period, most of the leaders who came to assume leadership and so on, they would either have been abroad in the UK or in the US. Before Eric Williams came back to Trinidad, he lived in the UK. And I understand he was a frequent visitor at the house of the actor Edric Connor. Was understand Edric Connor was a key person in the UK, and a number of Caribbean and African leaders who would later on would be at his house. In his biography written by Raleigh and George Lamming, they said his house was like the unofficial embassy because we were colonies. Yeah. And so the diaspora played a very important role in shaping the politics of the Caribbean. A lot of people return home. Not just in the English-speaking Caribbean, but even in Cuba, for example, a lot of the, before Fidel and they went back to Cuba to wage a revolution, they made tours to the US in the Cuban community, raised monies and so on. And what has happened, I think, is that the links became frayed, you know, between the diaspora and the existing political elite. And one of the things I think that has happened, I who have lived abroad understand this too, that you came with new ideas and they basically see us as foreigner at times, you know, saying those things can't work in Trinidad. And it has to do with the kind of backward politics that emerged in the Caribbean in the post independence period. I don't use the term post-colonial because we are not post-colonial anything. We are neo-colonies. And I want to emphasize that all the time because our academics are misleading people. So in the post-independence period, a very backward, inverted kind of politics developed. And so you didn't want anybody to come telling you anything different that could, you know, lead the flock astray. And one of the prime examples of this is the conflict between Eric Williams and CLR James, in which CLR James and Eric Williams were collaborators. And in the end, he placed him under house arrest. You know, so that is the kind of thing. And so we have to rethink our position, but it's only a progressive politics, I think, would create those links, because there are links. Don't think they are not links, because the political parties come up here all the time. But so they have a lot of associations. The Trinidad Association used to meet in my space in Atlanta, but the Trinidad and Tobago Association was like a party group. It didn't do anything to benefit Trinidad. It did things to benefit the party that those people were aligned to. And so a progressive politics must emerge in order to have that, I would call, proper links with the diaspora and those at home.
Just to add that I agree with your analysis. Just to add that there is a generational weakness or loosening of those ties, but yet there is still people who identify with the Caribbean and go back to the Caribbean for different reasons. And that is important as economically as well as politically. And as I said, even in Trinidad now, those loyalties to UNC and PNM are also loosening and weakening as people identify that there isn't that much difference between these parties. And they are, as Akko says, we're living in a neo-colonial state. And if we don't start to recognize that, we can't do anything about it.
Give thanks for that reasoning. When I'm going to listen to Tuana, I also think about when Brother Maurice Bishop, I believe in the 80s, began at Hunter College in New York. And the kind of vibes he received when he shared the Grenada Revolution intentions and objectives. And so in listening to the both on a reason, one big part of the Caribbean diaspora are remittances. Like, and with the U.S. foreign policy and migration, and that was one of a point that was made yesterday in our CARD, Haiti Action Committee, fifth solidarity from the Caribbean with our Haitian sisters and brothers, sisters in particular. That was mentioned, and we encourage Belizeans, and not only Belizeans, anybody who tune in, you could go to YouTube, XTV Belize Facebook page and XTV Belize YouTube page for listen to yesterday's Caribbean Dialogue CARD and Haiti Action Committee reasoning, where we had 4 sisters from Haiti, 3 who are actually living in Haiti, sharing their truths about what it's like being under occupation for so long, and how we can offer solidarity in a meaningful way. So make sure to go to our Facebook page, YouTube, XTV Belize, for tune into that, because we're being intentional in Caribbean people continuing the connection, this time from the bottom up. Because one of the things, and I believe our guest may be here, Brother Michael, I see the co-author's name on the screen. I don't see an image, but I see the name on the screen. So we'll bring them on in the second segment. But one of the things that's happening that I'll ask you all to just give a quick 2 cents before we end our first session, is that we see quite a bit of movement capturing. So you have political leaders, UN people, NGOs, CARICOM, some of us kinfolk who are not our kinfolk, who are for hire, that they have the solutions to what's happening to primarily African descendants racialized as Black people. So we look at reparations, for example. We look at the decision, a number of Caribbean leaders to send soldiers to Haiti against our people. That's not, oftentimes the people don't have the knowledge to really put a meaningful position forward. But those with colonial papers that I call degrees think that they're experts on every damn thing, and that they're speaking on behalf of us, the majority at the bottom. So I wanted to hear your 2 cents on movement capturing, Michael, and then I'll go to Brother Akko. Just a quick, as we exit this segment.
My experience is in a lot of political and cultural activity, from the activity in the Caribbean, and then most of my activity in London. And it is kind of naive if you think political and cultural movements will not be attacked from outside and also from inside. We've got too many examples of that. So my kind of politics is about who has the same mind as me, not necessarily the same skin color, who has the same experience of me, and who is willing to act for change. I think that is the key thing for me, and that's what I've learned in the politics of the Caribbean and the politics of London.
Thanks for that, Brother Akko.
The issue of movement capture, I had a discussion some time ago with some political people from the U.S. Embassy through my the MP invited me to this in my area. And what I was concerned with then, as I'm concerned with now, is what I call the NGOizing of social and civic space. Okay, so we had in Trinidad, in the civic and social and cultural space, sports clubs with long traditions in communities, debating societies and so on, right? What the political elites did is that they destroyed that civic, social, and cultural space and basically co-opted them into the political parties. And what happened post what we call the Black Power Revolution is that people began to rekindle those aspirations again. So we had some of the indigenous methods of house building, some we call Gayap and Lenhan, re-emerging, and which people collectively help each other build homes and run susu and all of those kinds of things. And what has been happening from my observation, and after I returned, living after 13 or 14 years abroad, was that in my area, for example, Mayaro, where I live, right, you cannot find any civic organization or cultural organization or sporting organization that is not penetrated by the multinationals in that area. I had the experience of working with a community trying to, the community center was in a very bad way. And we had to raise money and so on, do some things. And the first thing I went to the meeting, they said, well, look, let's go to the oil companies. And I said to them, why do we have to go to the oil companies? Those are things we can do. We can raise $500. Why do we have to go? And so it's what I call a kind of mendicant mentality has developed, which has sort of undermined the social, cultural, and civic spaces. And so it's not just movement capture. It is actually the destruction of the civic space, the civic fabric and social fabric of the society, and the replacement of that with these NGOs which are not indigenous and which do not have any interest of the community at heart. And that is an ongoing process. I've seen it in many, many, many instances in the community. And I have been fighting against it. That's why I think I told you I formed this organization in Rio Claro called the Rio Claro Heritage, in which we are promoting heritage as an important tool of mobilizing people and uniting a fractured community which is ethnically divided. But we are now seeing where they will set up 4 and 5 different organizations to try to undermine what you do. And that is what both political parties have a tendency to do, in addition to the multinational corporations who operate in that area and so on. And so it's something that needs studying, but there is no real debate about this. But from my understanding, it is, while some of it is movement capture, some of it is really destroying the fabric of the society, the indigenous cultural habits, and replacing them with a kind of corporatist philosophy, me, myself, and I. And I think I don't know what is it in the rest of the Caribbean, but I'm saying where I live in Mayaro, Rio Claro, Guayagari, that is what is happening as we speak.
Thanks, Brother Akko and Brother Michael. We'll take our first break. Our second guest should be joining us, who is the star of this conversation today, really. It's his life story that he authored and co-wrote with, is it Jean Tate or Jean Tate? It's pronounced, Michael?
Gene Tate.
Jean Tate. Yes. So on stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're coming out of Landa and out of Trinidad and Tobago and two arena fan that Trini roots. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
and you know there were U.S. military personnel, walking through the town. In fact, in one instance, I think even either the head of the Southern Command or a senior person in the Southern Command of the military um, had this environmental policy of planting trees on the coast, which I wrongly criticized publicly. Why would we want to have a military person in uniform, planting trees on our coastline? So I understand all of this, and but the point I was going to make is that there was an event in which the um, the U.S. embassy um, pulled educators and other influential people in the community to have some kind of meeting discussion on what they call fighting radicalism. You know, so I have a pretty good relationship with the local politicians. So my MP was telling me about this conference. I'm not going to that. I said, I'm not going to go there. I said, we need radicalism. you know, we need radical changes in the economy. We need radical changes in politics. So my job is not to deter radicalism, right? It is to deter religious extremism and how you propagandize religion. And so, but it stung them when I said that, and I said, look, I'm going to show you, if you want to speak to young people, I'm going to show you what has to be done. So we invited through our organization this sister who wrote a book, a Muslim book for children, and we brought her and spoke to the young people, about Islam, the tenets of Islam, and some of the things she did as a Muslim. But the point is that they come with these ready-made solutions. And we have to be able to create indigenous responses and indigenous solutions, which is what we did in that particular community. So don't want to prolong anymore because Michael and Jean is there.
Yes, yes, yes. And this is why it's so important that we tell our own stories. So you have publishing house like New Beacon Books. And we have joining us Jean Tate, who's the co-author of the book by Anselm, The Life of Anselm Samuel, My Life, Panman, Black Panther Youth Worker. So Michael, Jean, tell us about how to birth this book. Yes. We have an image that will show. Christy, can you bring up Michael actually has a copy of the book in his hand. And we also have an image that Christy there you go. We have it up on the screen now, Michael. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Can we mute our mics when we're not talking so we don't have feedback? So, Jean, tell us a little bit about yourself and how is it that you got to co-author this book?
Okay. I have known Sam, as he's known, for more than 50 years. We've done a lot of political work over those years, and youth and community work, and carnival activities, mass and steel band over all that period of time. And we started working on his memoirs about 30 years ago altogether, because he wanted to create something to leave for his children, for them to understand his life and his politics and his passions. And so I helped him work on that. Yeah.
30 years, Jean?
Sorry?
30 years? 30 years?
Yes, 30 years.
Why did it take so long?
Yeah. So it went from just a small thing, and it gradually got bigger and bigger, and all his political and cultural friends got interested in it, and said he must, make it into something much broader, more political, more cultural. Yeah. So gradually, and then Michael arose, got involved with it, very fortunately, because I don't think it would have actually happened without Michael. Yep. So,
What were some memorable times co-authoring the book with Brother Sam for Eugene?
okay. Okay. Well, some very memorable times that we had together were, first of all, we ran a youth centre in East London, in Hackney, which is a famous area for very large black community there. And we really made it very political and cultural environment there, which challenged the education authorities. And so it was a time when it was the youth were getting very active and political. There were lots of uprisings all over the country in 1981, and we supported the youth and had lots of discussions with them about the context of all that stuff and looking at the various power structures of the country and linking it with uprisings and other events in the Caribbean as well, because most of the young people came from the Caribbean. And we actually went with a youth group to Grenada in 1981 and 1980 and participated in the revolution there. And in fact, we knew some of the leaders of the revolution, including Maurice Bishop, but people like Bernard and Phyllis Cord as well, who were senior ministers in the revolutionary government. And it was very, very important experience for all of us, the young people particularly. Yeah, so that was an amazing experience that we had together. Yeah.
What contributed to your awareness as a European woman, racialized as white, to sacrifice so many years of your life to this movement?
Good question. Well, I suppose I have to say, I started. My parents were both communists in the Communist Party, which meant that I had a very different perspective of most of my peers, because they encouraged me and my sisters to understand the structures that were prevailing, the politics and so on. And in those days, the Communist Party was a much broader and yes, it was a cultural organization. It was a social organization as well as being strictly political. And from then on, they took me on anti-apartheid demonstrations and other demonstrations. I started demonstrating before I could walk, actually. And so it went on from there. So I was aware of the global oppressions and how they were created. And so it meant that when I started meeting political black people like Sam, they really encouraged me to really get a much better understanding. And I wanted to work and support. Yeah.
Respect, Brother Akko. You could ask Brother Michael as the editor, and Jean, whatever you want, as the Kaira co-host. Ann.
Yeah, I wanted to find out, did Anselm come to the UK with the TASPO, or did he come?
No.
What kind
No.
of, what, yeah.
He was essentially
a badger in Renegades.
Could you repeat? I didn't hear clearly.
He was essentially a badger in Renegades.
Yeah,
You hear
there's
me?
a lot of feedback, and I'm not hearing up. Apparently, you and Jean may be a bit closer. There's a lot of feedback. Yes, so somebody has a mute. Yes, one person has a mute. Yeah, Michael, you have to unmute. You have to unmute. You are muted. You're still muted. No, you're still muted. You have to hit the little mic and unmute.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Anselm was essentially a youth from Gonzales who was taken under the leadership of Renegades steel band in Port of Spain, and he became a badjon. And the badjon in this case do not actually play, but play iron as part of their role in the band. And things got really serious for him in terms of the violence and of the police. And he had a friend in London who offered to send him the fare to come to London. Now, I've done a research with many people from that background here in London, and many come to London in that way, that they were in the steel bands and had to run from police and ended up in London, New York, wherever.
Okay, so for the audience and Sister YaYa, you don't know what a badjon is, so I'll have to explain. So we have characters. It is basically is good John and bad John, but in Trinidad, you say one word, a badjon, okay? And a badjon is like if you live in the U.S., you would know about the Staggerly character, what is called the bad man in African American literature and folk culture. Have you familiar with any of the, right, they call him the bad man. There's a famous song called Staggerly. And it's a number of blues songs you hear about the Staggerly character. But he was the bad man in African American culture. So in Trinidad, we call him the badjon, okay? And they were from the marginalized sections of the society from which the steel band came. And they had peculiar codes of conduct, like they really defended community. Like there was one in my village, Panman, and recently I was talking with him because he's old now, like in his 80s. And so we were talking, that's recently, like a month ago. And I said, you were a real bad guy. He said, yeah, I was bad. And he said, I had 9 sisters and I just wanted to protect all of them, So there was some rationale for their behavior. It wasn't a willy-nilly gangster type thing like now. And the pan and the arts gave them social and cultural expression. So that's the definition of the badger, Sister YaYa and the listening audience.
Thanks, we needed that.
Yes. They also defended the steel bands from other bands and also from police. So they had a specific kind of security role within the bands, but they're kind of defending their culture, their band, their area.
Well, I don't know. A lot of people our generation again in Belize, we do have steel pans in band in Belize, but I had never associated being a steel pan player with political consciousness or your social status in the community, like coming from an impoverished family or community or neighborhood. Until I read the write-up on the book, I didn't know that. So again, it shows you when you don't know your stories, how we don't know how we end up in the situations that we're living in. And so that was very unique for me. I have to get a copy of the book. Come watch the book for self. How much page the book have?
How many pages? Hold on, let me just look at that.
So just to make a note while he's looking at the pages, the steel band were essentially community institutions. Every community had a steel band. They were really, really community institutions. And one of the only institutions from around which marginalized Africans could organize and mobilize. Almost every community had a steel band. And so if you look, he spoke about the renegades. Renegades comes from a particular community in Trinidad. If you look at the other band, which is Desperados, they came from a specific community called Laventille in Trinidad. And then All Stars. So all of the bands were actually community institutions, you know, and that is a critical thing to understand. And also, and I'm not sure what is the history of if the book goes into the history, but the steel band emerged out of the fact that certain African cultural practices were banned, like beating the drum was banned, and so on. And so the steel band is an evolution, if you want to call it, of a certain kind of consciousness that created this instrument. And what to me is important about the steel band, it represents to me the genius of people of African descent, in that you strip them of everything, their culture, their heritage, and you left them with, even though C.L.R. Jones has an important statement on that, he said, somebody asked him a question, and he said, they said, but the African had nothing. He said, no, we came it ourselves. And what he meant was that there's a consciousness and an intellect that you came with that the plantation system didn't destroy. But the steel band, as if you look at the steel band itself, you are looking at poor people with nothing, no economic activity, very little what you may perceive formal education and so on. And they took this discarded drum to create an instrument out of it. I was speaking with a young man who was working on my house here a couple of days ago, and he was lamenting the fact that he didn't learn from his father, who was a pan tuner, because he said his father had a piano in the house, an organ, I think, in the house, and he would take the pan, burn the pan, and he hit it with a hammer, and then he'd go and play a note on the organ and see if the note he's hearing on the pan, right, is identical or similar. And that takes genius. This is a person who had no formal education. Most of them barely had a 5th grade education. And it tells you the genius, and it speaks to what C.L.R. said when he said they came in. He said, no, they didn't come with the thing. They had themselves. We came with ourselves. Which if you discuss that in any serious way, it talks about a civilization and a consciousness that is wrapped up in and which expresses itself in things like the steel band and calypso and other things like that.
You go ahead and finish your thought, Michael, and then we'll close out this segment.
Okay. Just to say that it is a cultural defiance of all the oppression we have suffered in the Caribbean, well, in Trinidad specifically, a cultural survival. So when the drum is banned, they create a new drum, and the drum is called a tambour bamboo, which is bamboo, and you beat it and you stamp it on the ground. And those tambour bamboo bands started putting metal receptacles in their bands until they took over. And from there, we got the oil drum, created the steel band from it. So Akko is completely right in that the creativity, defiance, and resistance of African peoples, once enslaved, has produced this instrument, this genius of an instrument.
Big thanks. So we're learning, even though Sam isn't with us today, and Sam is alive and kicking. We're going to get that straight. How old is Sam now, Jean?
Sorry?
How old is Sam now?
He's 91 years. He's 91 years.
91 years. So in this second segment, we got to learn more about Sam. This book is the story of his life. And so we focused a lot on him as a pan man, and learned more about pan bands and his connectivity to African people in Trinidad in particular. Yeah. Yes, you want to say something, Jean?
Let me just switch my.
Okay.
No, I was just going to say, in addition to the creativity of creating the steel pans out of oil drums, there was the amazing thing that the steel drums were actually the discards of the US Army that had been occupying Trinidad before. It was what they left behind, which is rather, I think, ironic and rather wonderful. Yeah.
You know, they say somebody garbage or somebody else's treasure. In
Exactly.
the next segment, we'll focus more on Elder Sam as a Black Panther, that portion of his life, and as a youth worker in the final half hour of this morning's Sunday Review. So we have with us from London, but it was come from Trinidad and Tobago, is Brother Michael LaRose. Oh, and Venezuela Church, Brother Michael. But we can't forget your mom's contribution for sure.
Unmute, Michael. You're muted. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's always a back and forth migration between Trinidad and Venezuela and Trinidad. And my mother in that migration was born in Venezuela. And when we, as a family, could not survive politically in Trinidad anymore, we went to live in Venezuela, and from Venezuela, I came to London.
Yes, yes. I both with you and Jean were birthed in consciousness. And so you all had a choice. You could have chose differently, but you all chose, and it's a struggle, but you all chose to remain true to your parents' calling. Brother Akko, definitely majority of your whole life, the movement work. And I really am appreciative of Brother Akko's insistence that we, in 2025, we focus on the Caribbean from the bottom up, because many of us in Belize, and I'm sure the wider Caribbean, don't know these stories. This is definitely a generation passing the baton. And it takes 30 years for this book come to life. But give thanks that we need more books like these. So we'll take our last break, and then we'll come back and finish reasoning up about Anselm Samuel's life. 91 years old now. And maybe we could try again before they are old to bring him back to make it talk to you and make we see make we tell you by your own life in our own words. Break time.
We would love that.
20 years ago.
fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me. My name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me. My name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Billy City area. 110% Belize and proud of it, sir. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago, agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad, bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad, bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Follow me now. This a we da fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a me. My name is Pupa. Believe me, come from the Belize.
Of Sunday Review. Hi, it's a conversation. Michael Rose, New Beacon Books. I don't really say nothing much about New Beacon Books, so you have to say that more at a bookstore. An editor of the book about the life of Elder Anselm Samuel. The co-author is with us, Jean Tate, and we have, of course, our co-host, Brother Ako Mutota. Both Brother Michael and Brother Ako are from the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. So until we could get Jean back up, Michael, we want you to tell us in this segment more about New Beacon Books and more about Elder Sam's Black Panther and youth work as it relates to this book.
Okay.
When Sam came to Britain in 1958, he developed a skill and enthusiasm.
1 second, Jean, please. Oh, there you go. Brother Ako, your mic mute too? All right, go ahead, Michael.
He developed an enthusiasm and skill for bodybuilding.
And he got involved
with bodybuilding in all parts of London, as well as was picked up by some people who were connected to competition in Europe. And through that, he traveled a lot in Europe and Arnold Schwarzenegger was part of these weightlifting competitions and groups and trained him. Oh, sorry, Sam trained Schwarzenegger. Yes? So he's a new person to Europe and gets involved in this weightlifting and starts to have experiences all over Europe. At the same time, or not long after, he got very interested in the issues of Black people in London and Black people in Britain. And they were the issues of racism, police brutality, bad housing, etc., etc. And he started being involved in radical Black groups in London. We call it the Black Power period here in London, and it was linked to the activity of the Black Panthers in the USA. That was the stimulus, but there were a number of Black Power groups in London: Black Liberation Front, Black Unity and Freedom Party, the Black Panther movement, and earlier organizations that led to the spread of these Black Power groups. And Sam would be around all of them, but joined one, which is the Black Panther movement. It was led by a woman, Althea Jones LeConte, and had branches in Brixton, North London, and West London. And all these groups, not just the Black Panthers, but all these groups are very active. And that's what you have here in this book, a description of those activities, of those struggles, and of course, of interaction with the police and arrests and demonstrations, etc., etc. And also the politics inside these organizations was quite complex. Akko talked about the issues in the union movement. This was just the same. And some of that is in the book as well. At the end of this period of activity of young Black people in London for justice, for proper education, for justice in the courts against the police. A famous case was the Mangrove 9 in 1970. And it was the blueprint for people that came after, like myself, for political activity in Britain, especially against police and especially against the education system. Interestingly, my father, John LaRose, made a documentary film about that period of struggle, and it's called The Mangrove 9. It's still available. Look it up on YouTube or wherever.
I saw it. I was blown away. We are very disconnected in Belize, at least our generation, with the Caribbean diaspora in England, more so with those in the United States because of the mainland connection. So I'm very much appreciative of, and that's why it's so important to tell your own stories. And why the Beacon Books is more than a bookstore. Yeah, but check that out, Mangrove 9 on YouTube.
So that history, because it's a hidden history, and Sam was part of it. And when he recounts it, we then have a history of that period, and other people can contribute, but at least we have at least one account of that period. Yes, that is outside of academics. These are people who are really involved and have a lived experience.
And I think the other thing about that is that in the book, there are a number.
Your mic is not on, Jean.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Your mic.
It should be.
It's off. It's on the screen. It's off.
Brother Akko, after Jean respond, you can continue with your questioning.
Yeah.
We're not hearing Jean. Jean is having a struggle getting her mic on. Okay, Brother Akko, you could go ahead until Jean gets that sorted out.
Yeah, so it is very interesting because I grew up hearing about the mangrove. Oh, Jean is on now? Oh, she's off again.
I'm on now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You need to mute yourself, Michael.
Okay, go ahead, Jean, as Michael unmutes his.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, it's just that those all those political movements started from the murder in Notting Hill. What was his name, Michael? Kelso Cochrane. An Antiguan, yeah, who was murdered in Notting Hill during the very famous race riots. And that was when, that's what got Sam first engaged. He went down there to see what was happening. And that's where he discovered the famous Mangrove restaurant, where there were a lot of activists including those who were involved in the Mangrove 9 events, I should say. Yeah.
Jean, if you can quickly tell people who are listening, they may not have any idea what the Mangrove 9 is or was.
Okay. Maybe Michael should tell you about Mangrove.
Okay, you can mute your mic, Jean, and then Michael can respond. Mute your mic, Michael. Unmute your mic, Michael. I tell you, the mic, they give you one time today. Well, work it out. Go ahead.
Hear me? Yes. I was telling you about the Black Power organizations that operated in London. As you can see, it's a Black youth movement, and there are lots of organizations inspired by the activities of the Black Panthers and Malcolm X in America, but having their own problems here and trying to find their own solutions here. So there was a restaurant in the Notting Hill area called the Mangrove Restaurant. But it was not simply a restaurant, it was a meeting place for people and political discussions, as well as if you were, I don't know, coming from America and you wanted to meet people in the Black community, that's where you went. It was run by a politicized Trinidadian called Frank Critchlow. And he had a lot of problems with the police, who would raid his restaurant while customs were there and rough up people and look for drugs, and no drugs were ever found. And these raids continued. I don't know if people outside of Britain understand, but the most corrupt police force in Britain is the Metropolitan Police. And so partly it's a political thing, but partly it's a corruption thing. So these raids continued, and the Black Panther movement leaders, Althea Jones LeQuant, I have to keep correcting myself, decided that we have to do something about Frank Critchlow's Mangrove, and had a demonstration. They met outside of the Mangrove Restaurant on All Saints Road in Notting Hill, gave speeches. One of the speech makers was Darcus Howe, and they decided to process to the 3 police stations in Ladbroke Grove in Notting Hill, who were given Frank Critchlow all these raids and harassment. They got to one police station and will move into the next one when the police, who outnumbered them, I can't tell you the exact numbers, but the police who outnumbered the demonstration decided to attack, started to disrupt the demonstration and arrest people. They arrested 9 people. 6 of them were part of the Black Panther movement, and they went to the High Court to defend themselves. So there was 9 people arrested, and some of them defended themselves in court in a political manner. They gave out leaflets before the court. They got support from the community. They explained to the community what were the issues. They had people turn up at the court. They had demonstrations outside the court. And most importantly, they had a lawyer called Ian MacDonald, who was willing to take instructions from the defendants themselves.
A white lawyer.
He's a white lawyer, yes. And that was really crucial in the political and organizational way that the defense of the Mangrove 9 happened. The judge tried to intimidate the lawyer, Ian MacDonald, and intimidate the witnesses in the dock who defended themselves, and they failed because of their preparation and strategy for dealing with British justice. In the end, most of them were found not guilty. The judge had to admit, and it's the first time this happened in British modern history, that the police were institutionally racist and were really targeting black people. First time it was admitted in court. And that Mangrove 9 experience then was turned into the documentary. But it's importantly for people like me, the next generation of activists, use the same methods and strategies that Mangrove 9 to defeat police in courts in Britain, all over Britain.
Thanks, Michael. We have 7 more minutes. Brother Aka, you had another question you want to ask before we got to final remarks?
Yeah. No, I was making a comment on, we grew up hearing about the Mangrove 9. I also know of the works of Darcus Howe, who was also known as Darcus Owusu at one point in time. And the Mangrove 9 was a stimulus for a lot of struggle in the Caribbean. We were reading about these things. In fact, I think Malcolm X made a visit to England, and Jan Carew, the famous Guyanese writer, wrote a book about it, I think, called Blood in My Ghosts, in which he met with Malcolm X and had conversations with him. So there was this environment wherever people of the Caribbean were, an environment of struggle, and so the Mangrove 9 and the Walter Rodney incident in Jamaica, and so all of these things contributed to the revolutionary movement in the Caribbean. In fact, people like Maurice Bishop, they were in England at the time. He was on the way back to Grenada, passing through Trinidad, and he was impacted by what was called the Black Power movement in Trinidad. And he said, quote him, he decided he's going to go to Grenada and do that. Also, the fact that Althea Jones was the founding person of the Black Panther, but there's another Trinidadian, the other Jones, left of Karl Marx.
Althea.
Not Althea.
Yes.
Yeah. She also was a key figure.
Yes.
Yeah, in terms of that movement. And she was actually one of the first women, a Black woman, to visit China, I think in the 1950s or 60s. And she was so significant in the struggle that the U.S. deported her from the United States because she was active. Huh?
Claudia Jones.
Claudia Jones.
Yes.
And the United States deported Claudia Jones from the U.S., and the Trinidad government did not want her. So she ended up having to go to London, where she got involved in the movement and was significant in all of the struggles in the United Kingdom and beyond. So there was this tradition of struggle, and pioneering figures. I mean, the fact that these two women emerged from that and went to lead, right? And you have had that tradition with, there was a book that Rola Ruddock wrote on
Elma Francois,
who came from that same tradition. And even though she was not credited, they said, but she was the leader of the movement, even more advanced than the men. But because of the prevailing conditions of the time, she's was almost written out of history, So it is very interesting to understand that the pan and the politics and the revolutionary, all of these things were interconnected. And it is something that, unfortunately, it seems that too many of the new generation of radical revolutionary people don't seem to understand this. I mean, one of the conflicts we had in Trinidad when I was active in the movement was those who considered themselves Marxists felt that we were cultural nationalists and were critical and so on. Some of the comments, we all talk about it now, how short-sighted we were. And now we are all older men, now rehashing the errors of the past And the thing is that to give them credit, we never give enough, I would say, credence to the class analysis, which was very important. And they didn't give credence to the fact that cultural defense was important. So hopefully in reading this history, the next generation will be able to synthesize both tendencies and be able to move the struggle forward.
And that's a lot to ask. I could say from Belize, we have poor literacy rate, poor, and the Ministry of Education has consistently failed in ensuring that Belizean children, and our interests at UBAD, because our Black Power movement would have been 1969 to 1974, United Black Association for Development. That's where UAF got our name from. Started off as a cultural organization, became a political party, and then out of that, we still have the Mandela newspaper, 55 years, Creme Radio, 35 years, XTV, 21 years, UBAD Educational Foundation, 29 years. And they did not, and that's one of the things about hindsight, looking back, what we can learn. And so these conversations are critical, and I want us to continue to expand these conversations. Before we go, I need final thoughts from Jean and from Michael. And Michael, you can't go without talking about New Beacon books. And that's one of the joys of having both Brother Ako and Brother Michael here, because they are, the word are bibliophile, they are book lovers. One of our viewers on Facebook, Sonia Allen, my dear sister, said, we must create a book club. I don't want an ex-dream or one of mine was to have exactly what you have or what you've inherited and uphold or upheld, Michael, is New Beacon Books. And Brother Ako and Sister Fanta for years had bookstores in the United States. We would love to, like, nothing would make me happier to have one black bookstore and coffee house and tea house with natural teas from Belize, but that's just a dream. I don't know if it'll ever be fulfilled. Tell us about New Beacon Books, Michael, and then we'll give the mic to Jean.
New Beacon Books was founded by my father, John LaRose, and his partner, Sarah White. But the backstory of why the New Beacon Books was founded goes back to identification that politics and culture have to work together to make change. So he was influenced by the Beacon magazine, which was a cultural thing about literature and having our own validation, our own criticism of our art by people who were trained classically in European art and European literature. So they used their skills to say, you know what we have here in this Caribbean region is just as good as anywhere else, and we want to validate it and promote it. So Beacon magazine was one of the things that helped, that influenced us. The others were the insurrections in the 1930s, which produced the trade union movement and unions like OWTU in Trinidad. So, and further back is the struggle for Carnival, 1881, and the issues of the art of Kaiso, Calypso, steel pan, and all the related arts that go with that creativity. And going further back, the insurrections, the most important insurrections of enslaved people, most important being the Haitian Revolution. So those are the things that formed the bookshop and the publishing house. And the point is to pass on information to the next generation through books. But as you point out very importantly, we have to be able to read, to take in these books and not just accept to read the information on a screen, A4 screen. We have to read and understand that books have a deeper history, a deeper knowledge inside of them that we must use in our struggles.
Thanks, Brother Michael. Final thoughts, Jean, and let us know how much this book costs and how people could buy the book.
Yeah, it's £16.99. And do you have the? Well, you have the contact of New Beacon Books because it's available from them. Yeah.
Jean mentioned Shabazz.
Sorry.
Mention Ellie Shabazz.
Yes. Sam's his political name at the time of the Black Panther movement was Eli Shabazz. And Shabazz was, you will remember, one of the names that Malcolm X used, and that's why Sam used that as well. So it's Eli Shabazz publication. Yeah. And can I just say briefly, it was Sam's uniting of political activity and education with cultural education that really made me start to understand a whole load of new things, that I didn't understand before. Yeah, very important. And book groups, very important. Reading groups.
Thank you, Jean. Okay, for the past, we've cut off time, but definitely I'm getting 1 or 2 texts that people really appreciate the guest today and the conversation. So again, big thanks to Elder Anselm Samuel, 30 years for he and Jean Tate, finally with Brother Michael LaRose from New Beacon Books, all in London, to finally have this book for sale. And on could go to New Beacon Books, they have social media presence from Facebook and IG. They're more than a bookstore. I mean, it feels warm. It feels like community-like. And I got that part, and I've only been there twice, even though I was born there. I definitely want a space where I enjoy visiting because it feels like home. Give thanks to everyone who supports that space, including my sister, Nicole, who is the curator for the Caribbean collection at the British Library. Big up, Nicole, and everybody who supports that space. Thanks again for being our guest today, Jean Tate and Michael LaRose. Brother Akko, big thanks. I'm going to look forward kind of Trinity. You got a knowledge, Black conscious, like, yes, we give African ancestors and ancestors one good name. As well as we have to give thanks for European racialized as white people who have chosen, who were answered the call to walk in solidarity with African descendants racialized as Black people globally, such as Jean Tate. And last week we had Danuta Radznik, Brother Akko? Danuta Radznik. So we do have a small group of such people, but they are among us. We want to thank
Guyana. From Guyana.
Danuta
is from Guyana.
Yeah. Yes. We want to thank our security guard, Shane Flowers, Master Chief Operator, Christy Flowers. Christy, show that book cover for me again, please. And in Crime Radar, we have Larry G. This show will repeat at 5:30 this evening on XTV local channel. You could listen at your convenience, Facebook and YouTube, XTV Belize. Big thanks. We never get Brother Anselm Samuel, but we hope to get him back in the future before the year end and bring you both back. This was really an awesome collaboration. We learned a lot about each other and why it's so important that only the people want to save the people.
Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots. All people who love them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. Them country bad love them homeland. Will never give it up to another nation. This is the we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This is the we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This is me name is Pupa. Believe me come from